Oh, there he is. Yay.
Oh, I'm here. Okay. Sorry, I was here. It was like in the background. Sorry.
Yes. I didn't see you pop up, so I didn't get to add you to
Different
stage.
camera now too. All right. Well, good thinking on the fly, Rachelle.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
And now let's all talk about technology.
Yay, technology. All right. We are going to jump straight into it. John, do we need to give you a second for video? Well, while I'm doing housekeeping really, really fast because I have eaten through 15 minutes with my tech gremlinness. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. I am so sorry about the Pi Day technical difficulties. We are very excited to get started on today's panel discussion on UX and proposals. I'm very quickly going to say, I'm Rachelle. I'm your Chief Bakers Officer here at Pi. My job is to bring you amazing educational opportunities like this, and hopefully they're seamless. Thank you for bearing with me. For today's session, when we talk about UX, we are actually focusing on client experience. So keep that in mind. We're thinking about how clients interact with and perceive the proposals we create. I will be monitoring the chat now that we don't have a Q&A function anymore. For your questions, I will be saving them for our panelists at the end. Yes, this session is being recorded and will be available to attendees afterward. I will send out instructions for how to access it because it'll be a little bit different. But yeah, we are going to dive straight in. So I'm very excited to introduce our panelists, Brianna Carter, Ida Shainman, and John Barker, and I'm going to pass it over to them to do their introductions.
Like Rachelle said, happy Pi Day and welcome everyone to our session. I am Briana Carter. I'm a marketing strategist at Page.
I'm Ida Shainman. Were you done? Okay. I'm Ida Shainman, Principal and Creative Director of Substance 151. We're a brand strategy, design, and digital firm, highly specialized in the AC industry. Just really quickly, why I'm here, I have spent my entire career in the digital space. I'm also a techno optimist, and I judge everything on the quality of user experience, from the software I use to the countries I visit. So very excited about the topic that brings my two passions together and our panel, and look forward to all of us sharing ideas and geeking out in the name of a better experience.
Should have gone first. It's hard to follow that introduction, Ida. I'm John Barker, VP of Pricing for Strategic Growth Partners. I'm grateful to be here and involved with this panel. I've been in GovCon since I graduated college in 2000 and probably submitted a couple thousand proposals now from the lead negotiator standpoint. So just trying to fulfill a role here and give you all a good, well-rounded discussion.
Awesome. And everyone can probably see why this group is chosen. Rachelle and I had been talking about, what if proposals were videos? Like, that would be so incredible and so amazing. So glad that everyone's here to join us in this conversation. Can we start with round one?
Yeah, so round one is all about, it starts with the first rule of marketing, which is, Ida, I know you're going to say this, know your audience, and I'm gonna pass it to you. What does that mean in the context of all this?
So let me kind of start from a little bit, one step higher than that. Every detail, no matter how insignificant, every interaction, whether planned or unplanned, all add up to an experience. The quality of each experience directly affects how your audiences think of your firm, for better or worse. In other words, the quality of the experience you create for your review committee is a key deciding factor in whether they like you, trust you, choose you. And if after all the time you spend creating your proposal, it actually reaches your audiences and connects with them. So at the core of each experience are end users. All the different people on your review committee, since we're talking about it in the context of proposals. There are visionaries who want to be blown away by the creative vision and impact. They may skip on some details. Then there are technicians who want to get lost in technical details. And then there are people who don't care about the vision or technical details. They just want it to be done exactly as promised, on time and on budget, and they like seeing everything in a spreadsheet format. And one role that we all need to start considering is that the possibility of AI evaluating your proposals is very real. And we'll be talking about AI kind of throughout the session. But at the very basic level, not only do you need to cater your your proposals to typical humans, but you need to start thinking about structuring your proposals and creating that experience to the needs of a robot. So how do you tailor your proposal experience to each of those roles and personas within a single context of a single proposal? You need to have a deep understanding of who they are. And fortunately, in our industries, we don't need to get too personal, like their household income or shoe size, but you do need to get beyond superficial facts. What are their motivations? What are their goals, their fears? What would help them do their job and advance their personal agendas? In other words, what's the personal value of hiring your firm versus someone else? And there are many ways to approach developing meaningful personas. And if you do it's a lot of work, but if you do a lot of repeat work for similar organizations or even for the same client, you will eventually have a reusable library. So even though it takes time and work, it's really worth the effort, not just for the immediate RFP response you're working on, but just kind of thinking about systems and processes you can put in place in the future. And since we're including AI in our conversation, because how can you not today? AI can be a great tool to help you develop your personas and then run your narrative and your win themes through AI tools to help you very quickly identify the gaps against each persona. It's a whole topic on itself, so trying to bullet point it pretty quickly. So one thing you can do is begin by uploading your existing ideal client profiles, personas, or just if you don't have it as organized, any relevant information you already have about your personas into a tool of your choice like ChatGPT. You can also upload LinkedIn profiles that match your personas, and those could be the actual people on your review committee, provided they have good and complete profiles. And if they don't, then just find people, use LinkedIn search and filters to find people just like them. Prompt AI to source additional information like common challenges, misconceptions, or even word choices. Anything that can help you make your proposal feel more personalized and enable you to speak to the hearts and minds of your personas. You do have to use your human intelligence to know what to ask in your prompt, but AI has immediate access to massive sets of data at its fingertips, and it would take you years to compile all of that information. So use that computing power and data access to your advantage. And once you develop detailed personas, save them and then use the same AI tool to evaluate your proposal narrative or win themes or the flow against those personas to help you identify any gaps. And again, you will need to outline the criteria for how the content should be evaluated, but because AI is not magic. But AI is very good at identifying those gaps and giving you that ability to quickly check throughout the proposal process whether or not you are appealing to all of those individual personas.
Wow, that's going to be hard to top or augment, but I will do my best. So, as Ida had mentioned, AI is kind of taking over the world. And so, your job isn't going to be replaced by AI. It's going to be replaced by someone who can use AI to their advantage, to their core capabilities, to whatever their mission is, right? So, we spoke about marketing 101 and knowing your customer and your client. Ida mentioned there's many different roles that comprise that evaluation.
Oh no, John, did we lose you?
No, I think can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We can-
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. So, you really need to look at, who's going to be evaluating your bid. And, but I want to back that up a little bit more in a sense that are you aligned with that client and that customer? And is your vision for your company and your drive consistent with the mission of that enterprise or that agency? And so, I feel like a lot of times I've been there working on a proposal, trying to develop win themes, and I'm kind of like, what is this customer? We don't know who they are. Yeah, we might be able to do this, but there's a misalignment there. And
John, I think we lost you again.
Lesson learned. Pi Day webinars are cursed. We'll try another celebration next year. Oh, no. I wonder, my internet is spotty.
He just dropped.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Hopefully he comes back in.
Well, hopefully he'll come back and we can.
Perfect. Do we want to, I know we really do want to hear what he had to say, but in the interest of time, do we want to maybe jump or?
Maybe let's go to round 2 and we can always come back, or he can include whatever he was saying in his round 2 response.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. Round 2 is all about taking that insight, knowing your audience, and using it to create a rewarding reviewer experience. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we do that and what it looks like.
Yes. So I like to pride myself as a storyteller. I have experience in architecture, engineering, and construction. So it's really nice to have that holistic view. But when we talk about customer or client experience, it is about the story. Are you delivering on that message, and are you doing that clearly? So it's about, telling that story that resonates with the client. It's about making it easy and easily scannable. So talking about scannability, ease of finding those key points that you need to hit home with your client. It's also talking about how to create that good experience. So for example, in the past, I have done proposals where I've embedded sound bites as well. And it was a nice way to allow the client to hear actual thought leadership from the people who we were presenting on the proposal. And I mean, think about it. It was for actually a museum. And to think about when you go into a museum, you see those little options to be able to hear a connection or hear an experience. So it's thinking about those little creative things that can help you actually just see additional ways of transforming that story and adding on a little bit more. Another way that you may have seen is with QR codes. So being able to, whether it's print or digital, because with QR codes, you can also embed the link where you can click on that if it's digital, but having those QR codes to take you to additional content. Obviously, sometimes we get stopped from doing that because they'll tell you explicitly either in the solicitation or someone asks a question and you see that. But when you can, give it a try, and it allows you to kind of add a little bit more to that client experience. John or Ida, anything to comment on that?
No, other than the Wi-Fi of my office just got knocked out, so it must be irrational Pi Day here. No, I just wanted, again, you mentioned something earlier that, some people, like charts, some people like a story, some people like a video. And I think, kind of viewing it in the lens of the beholder who's perceiving and evaluating your bid. I think what's important to understand are different modes of learning. Like some people are better at processing things visually or audially. And I think, in the time of AI, we really got to think about it as interpretation and a translation. How is the viewer, or the receptor, like translating your bid into, okay, yeah, because really you want to put yourself into, their shoes and go, how can we get them to, Edith's point, know, like, and trust your business to do a good job in fulfilling their mission needs and their requirements. And, from someone who's a pricer, it's also like, is it within their budget? And can they afford us? Because nothing's worse than, giving a nice, well put together proposal and then go, hey, you're 50% expensive than the company we're going to award it to. And, so, again, I really want to think about that alignment, and are you really bidding on the right things for your company? And again, sorry for the technical issues. It seems like it's well spread out. And sorry, I'm on my phone with my office, and my bookshelf game is not nearly up to speed like Ida's is. So anyway,
So my main takeaway from what John just said is that you have to put yourself in your audience's shoes and think about what would make it easier for them to review your proposal. Because if the document is poorly organized, there's a pretty good chance they simply will not get through it, especially if they send, an RFP to 300 people and now they have to read 300 responses. We pretty much, I think, all can assume that the review committee is busy and overwhelmed. Like, that's the baseline, right? So especially if you're submitting electronically, there's so many ways to help them navigate through your 90-page document. One, and this is a huge pet peeve of mine, so you will hear my voice going up. Always make sure that your table of contents is clickable. There is absolutely zero excuse for it not to be. If you're referencing previous sections throughout your narrative, throw a hyperlink there so people can go back and forth without having to flip through pages and pages, whether, digital pages and pages, scrolling and scrolling, trying to find that section. We submit everything electronically, so pointing people to our website for case studies, testimonials, just general capabilities works really, really well. However, I also am pretty sure that some people still just print out those digital submissions. So if you are pointing people to the website, either include just some high-level summary before sending them there in case they don't go to the website. Or like Brianna mentioned, use QR codes, which can work really well for both print and electronic distribution. This is getting a little bit into the weeds of it, but even though it's much cleaner to link text, like saying view case study here and make that a link, I always provide a fully spelled out link in case people do print it out and can't click here. It still takes some work for them to type it into the browser, but at least they can get there if they're willing to type the URL. And I always use shortened URLs, again, for the ease of typing. Especially if this is your first time working with this client, your proposal offers the first glimpse into what it's like to be working with your firm, what the experience will be like. So, we always say, like, ask good questions, follow the process. But did you add value beyond the minimum proposal requirements? Did you make it easy and, dare I say, enjoyable for them to review your proposal? With other things being equal, this could totally tip the scales.
I think one more thing I'd like to add is, pictures worth 1,000 words. So, if building in like really good, well thought out graphics that convey kind of complex concepts is critically important, and really distilling that. And again, with a different lens of, okay, we might have someone who's a good technical reader of information, but then, someone who is like the champion of it, is the owner of the product or something, doesn't really understand those weeds. But, oh, look at that picture helps me get from here to there, and explains it in a way that my engineers are also like reading and going, yeah. So, again, you want them to get them those warm and fuzzies when they're reviewing those things. And I've heard debriefs from some clients that we lost things, and it's like they had to bookmark things with stickies because they're, wanted bound print print artifacts, and they had to go back and reference, and there's nothing more annoying from the reviewer. And even you might get a good mark if it's annoying for them to review your proposal. It's probably not going to result in the result you want.
Limiting barriers to communication is huge. I think that's what we do as proposal managers all day long. That's our number one job, is overcoming communication barriers. But I think this is a really nice jumping off point into our round 3 topic. I don't think it's in the weeds at all, because I wanted to shift to delivery and execution. So like, we know what we need to know. Like, we've set our foundation on what we need to know. We've kind of identified the structure. I also live in the AEC world with Brianna, so excuse the metaphor. Now, how do we deliver and execute on this? Like, what does it look like within these proposals that we're submitting?
I can start from because Ida said something really great in that last section about, even just how you present it. So if we think about it, because yes, I unfortunately still have to print some of these, that delivery package is everything. So if we think about this in terms of delivery and execution, are you telling your story the way you need to? And is it getting to the client the way it needs to? So yes, there are plenty of times too when I send an email version and it's like, hey, here's this proposal. It is sent to you as single pages, but it really translates well if you look at it in spreads. And sometimes you can say, here's a spread version and here's a single page option. But like, having those little notes allows them to get into your mindset as well. So being clear and direct and concise. Going back to the print aspect, also thinking about things like tabs. Having tab sections to showcase where each individual section is crucial, because it allows them to easily go back and navigate where each of those sections are. And then to Ida's point about also having kind of those written out not QR codes, but the written out URLs, just makes it so much easier for people who are going to go back and navigate. Going off of that though, actually, I'm going to back up and let you two talk and then see what else kind of comes out of this, because I could talk forever about all of this.
I can share a couple of my favorite things that both show creativity but also enhance the proposal review team's user experience. So if you still do print proposals that you deliver as a package, some of the things that actually were pretty hot a few years ago, I don't know if people still do that, but I always love those like embedding video cards in your proposal, printed pieces. And it could be a great way to add that extra dimension and showcase your work and be a good storyteller without also increasing that page count. I also feel that if you have to submit something physical and printed and kill a lot of trees in the process, maybe you can do something more interesting than a wire-bound document with a plastic cover on it. Again, what Brianna just mentioned, like that first impression of getting that little present of a proposal is very important. I've seen, and we have done, like cool promo boxes that included materials that speak to either the type of a project or maybe like the end user audience in some way. And it shouldn't be anything that requires much work from the reviewer. Like, don't send them a puzzle that they have to put together because they really may not want to, but rather something that adds that tactile, interactive element to a medium that's not inherently interactive. And then I think for electronic proposals, really the sky is the limit. Well, the sky and then the budget and proposal requirements. We already talked about QR codes and sending people out to either your website or creating a microsite for your proposal that houses all the information that they can look in sort of in the non-linear fashion. Again, incorporating video, audio, 3D, AR, VR, you can do so much with electronic media. And we're a three-dimensional industry, so engaging all the senses and spaces also really caters to how different people receive and process information. What John mentioned, that, different people like different presentation. And, you can, it's hard to do something super innovative if you're submitting 3 proposals a week, and I get it. But think about maybe those once in a lifetime, high value projects. Form follows function always, but even if there is no page count or forms or checkboxes, everything should still be done with the user in mind and in the name of creating a better experience for that user. So it's not about being cool. It's not about what you want to say. It's about creating this highly personalized, useful experience for your busy, impatient, overwhelmed, and towards the end of the process, probably really cranky review committee. And just understanding those different roles that we talked about at the beginning and the type of information and presentation that would work well for each persona.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we're very limited to what the client's asking for within the constructs of their solicitation requirements. So, in my world, normally it's pretty you're limited to the amount of videos or QR codes you can provide. And, I think about a lot of that, what is the amount of creativity we can deploy in this particular bid? Like, does it allow hyperlinks? Sometimes they don't, and that's a kind of a crafty way to put more content within your 60-page document. Um, but also think about, in going back to AI, is it even evaluated by a human anymore? Because, what we're kind of seeing in the Doge era, at least at the federal perspective, you're having less people review more opportunities, more proposals, because with the proliferation of AI writing tools, people are just submitting, they have the bandwidth and capability to submit more bids. However, the people who are reviewing it are less and less. So, I believe they're already doing it, but, and there's kind of this um, whack-a-mole game. Well, if you're doing it, disclose it, and then like you should be writing these solicitations, at least from the customer standpoint, with AI, but also again learning about yourself and your organization in the process. And I think about things like, again, going back to a picture's worth 1,000 words, like, more often than not, we spend a ton of time like looking at little like meatball charts of, conveying this information. Here's your qualifications, what you're looking for in your next offer, and then how can we present that to kind of make sure our firm and our offer is like in the bird dog seat, the number one position. And, I remember early on in my career where I had a manager that couldn't read a spreadsheet, and I just made it into a graph, and all of a sudden he's like, aha, now I understand that. And it was a very impactful moment for me early in my career, because again, I'm very good at, my little niche thing, but pulling back that aperture and be like, what exactly are we doing here, and how can we put our best foot forward within the scope and requirement that our customers are asking for. And so I just think about a lot of those things. Um, but again, at the end of the day, you were trying to maximize your firm's score. And, unfortunately, right now we are very limited to what they're asking for, and we don't want to overthink it a lot. So, and maybe it's different in the commercial side where, I think of like building models and going, hey, this is the community development we're going to do, and here's all these buildings are going to look like. And maybe I'm in the wrong industry sometimes where we can deploy some of those things, like open up a box and here's exactly how we'll deliver it, provide like a prototype model of the widget that your customer's looking for somebody like your firm to do.
And it's interesting that you say all that, because that's where my brain starts to go, like, what more can we do? But as you said, John, procurement and the people who are reading our proposals kind of, at times they limit us. But then you can also have that great client where you can do kind of whatever to win them over. But it's interesting that you bring it up because we talk about the accessibility of it all, but then what about the equity piece? So thinking about like who can do these types of cool things in their proposals. It's usually people who have more resources, people who have more knowledge and know-how. I'm sure there's a handful of people on this call who may use InDesign and some who don't, some who use Canva and some who don't. And so it's thinking about just the equity of it. And a lot of the times you are limited to these things, and that's why you have, such strict requirements in these proposals, because they're trying to even the playing field. But when you have that one moment to kind of shine, use those resources, jump into that creativity. The pie is in the sky.
I love all this. Any final thoughts on delivery and execution, or continuing that equity conversation before we jump to what I think will be like the longest, biggest, meatiest piece of the panel?
I feel like I need to make a disclaimer. So we don't do federal, we don't do municipal, we don't do state. A lot of our clients do, some of them do both private and public. So I recognize some of the things that I'm throwing out there are great if you are in the private sector, John, to your point, but just wanted to acknowledge that.
No, I appreciate that, because again, I think about things like, we often say shape that battlefield. And what that means is basically you are deploying capture and planting the seeds within that customer before these solicitations are even met. So if you think you would be better off in a verbal setting, in an oral setting where I can present with charts and graphics, and hey, here's a VR headset, for example, you can envision yourself with our solution because we've already thought this out. So I like hearing these things from the commercial side, because I think now the opportunity is right to maybe start planting those seeds within the government and the evaluators. There's less of them to do. How do we do more with less? Everyone hates that because, what does that even mean, right? Like work harder, work many hours, work more efficiently. But I love hearing these things because, again, we need to be forward thinking, and what is the best method to convey our solution is the best solution for your needs.
I love that we have multiple industries and flavors represented here, because I love to. My background is like advertising and communications. That was my schooling, so I like had this big dream of all these cool things that I could do, and then I got dropped into state, local, and unfortunately federal proposals, and was still stealing inspiration from the advertising world and those super creative minds that get to do all that stuff, and like seeing how I could pull it in. So I think there's still a lot of value in throwing out the wild, which is why I want to move on to round 4, which is really our think tank. And I don't want you to hold back. This is a trends section. I want you to just think about what's possible. How do we expedite the selection process? Can we gamify proposals? What do things look like now and in the future? What can they look like? Just go ham for this last one.
And I know because we keep on talking about VR and AR. And I know in our last conversation, we were talking about, especially in the architecture world, we're often, sharing our plans and our concept designs, but, keeping it kind of fluid and open to where clients can get involved in that process. But what if we could go into a interview with a headset and you say, like, you start to make those selections, or what if it was a website and you start to make some of those design selections right then and there? So like the idea of a website just sounds so incredible, or so, like just having that interaction sounds incredible.
Yeah, and I'm kind of, again, now that you've heard my disclaimer, I don't have to feel bad about it. But the thinking, John, you mentioned like 3D models, right? So what's the next step for that, right? I would love to see proposals using innovative delivery formats, gamification, short films. Why not? Multi-sensory experiences. We all, mentioned AR, 3D, VR, because again, we're we're in the business of creating spaces and places with our projects, right? So how can we bring these same sensibilities into the proposal? I really would love for things kind of move that way, especially with, technology is becoming less cost prohibitive. So in terms of equity, there are a lot of things, and AI should be thanked for that in part, that is kind of leveling the playing field in terms of access to technology. So I just hope that we're going to see in the next few years really innovative things.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of all the use cases that we could use and put AI on, my immediate thought is, when we were talking about how AI can help us do the bids, and I've been kind of trashing a little bit of AI because of some of the stuff I've seen and some of the tools I've used, because it's like, a race to the average, right? Because you're taking depending on those LLMs and what you're feeding it, there's an old adage called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And I think a lot about that and so, I'm into, can AI start doing the actual job function? Like, are the robots going to do the jobs, And so when I think about, where we are in the technological phase where, frankly, the technology is outpacing our brains to think about, all of these things. So, maybe I've watched too many Terminator movies, but at the same time, like, we really need to figure out how to harness and leverage this technology in a way that makes sense for ourselves, but our organizations and ultimately our customers. And so, we're really on the leading edge of all of these things, I think, right now. And, being a part of discussions with well-rounded individuals, talented, who are also in the same space. Because, again, at the end of the day, like, our job is to win proposals, is to make sure that our value proposition is clearly and concisely conveyed. We have a compelling solution and a competitive one, again, with all of those things like in alignment. um, where we want to see from the future, I mean, gamification, I love that idea. As someone who had to literally put New Year's resolutions on to stop staying up till 3 a.m. and gaming, I understand the value and the time suck that is, but also there's a lot of opportunities to create games that train people to do things in a certain way. And when I think about the gamification of proposals, it's almost like, how do you get from round one to round two to round three? And I do a lot of sole source contracts with the federal, which basically the media will call a no bid contract, which I don't like that term, because there's obviously going to be a bid. If there's an award, there's a bid. But what I didn't realize is that there is a competition beforehand. It's just unseen from my chair, right? And so when I think of that gamification, it's also like, we've also dealt with customers that don't necessarily know what they want. Like, I'll believe it when I see it kind of deal. And so I think having that industry and customer collaboration, in that, what is within the realm of possibility, and how can we create a game to where we're meeting closer and closer in the middle with their expectations, what they want, and then what we can offer.
And the cool thing with gaming as well is it's an immersive experience. So you're making decisions, and I mean, some games you make one decision and that's like the rest of your story. But then there's other times where you can start to build out those choices. I mean, let's think Minecraft. Like, we can start building these things literally. But then also thinking about, going back to your point on AI, John, is, well, again, who is reviewing this? And will AI eventually be the sole thing that's getting you to, let's say, the interview stage? And it's having those big, bold words that are, directly tied to that solicitation. So it's like, okay, at least I get through that screening process. But then I'm thinking even, broader and crazier, whatever we want to say, it's Pi Day. Like, what if our proposals, like thinking about them being movies or short films, What if they were just podcasts? I mean, we're always so on the go, and we're multitasking. Should we be multitasking? I don't know, but we're multitasking, and sometimes just hearing what someone has to say to you allows it to resonate. If I could hear what you want me to like hear, and then I can write down some of those key things and what is memorable, I mean, that kind of makes or breaks teams.
I have to admit, my brain just leapt into choose your own adventure type of
Yes.
books that I loved as a kid because, again, like, just because you convey something and say something, it's like reiterate what I said back to me, and you're like, that person didn't understand what I was saying or took a different inference off of what I was trying to say. And so, again, that's kind of where my mind went to what you were saying, Brianna, is, just like, what path do you want to follow? And at which point does it make sense for my company to continue to follow yours in that alignment? Are we aligned? Are we all agreeing to go to the same place? And sometimes you have to discover that path with them and then forge your own path, and if that's the direction you want to go, then you will continue to want to woo that client because that's what you're really doing, want them to get them to know, like, and trust you.
And if you think about it too, with like, potential people that you want to hire, can you imagine if we start doing this and what kind of talent we can bring into our firms? We're starting to bring in the people who are all about, UX and just focusing in on the kind of the back end of customer and client experience. And you could have more web developers on your team, and just think about the technology that we could add to our teams and the substance to like our stories.
And also think about, AI, and I know it's pretty controversial right now whether or not like it should be evaluating, but however it all shakes out in the next few years. But at some point, if it is how it's going to progress, AI has access to data. It doesn't really need 35 firms sending in technical specifications, like somewhere it all exists or will exist. So then what's the future of proposals? Is it becoming more like a competition of creativity? Um, I don't know. Or maybe there are no proposals and there's data everywhere, and municipalities just pick their sets of data and hire a firm. I don't know. But I think my hope is that, with AI, a part of it is, and a lot of people are using it right now for efficiencies. I think we have this incredible power that we can do so much more with, but efficiency is definitely part of it. So if the efficiency part, whatever it is taken care of by AI, then on both evaluating and submitting, and then we can free up our human intelligence to do more creative things.
But I do foresee, though, that there's an old adage where no one ever got fired from hiring IBM, right? Because they're the blue chip. Everyone knows them. They have a high reputation with a high dollar amount. And I think one of the things I envision and what I've kind of built my career toward is really looking for the up and coming companies that know how to leverage and harness the power of AI and unleash the creativity of their team. And I think so it's important to, you mentioned something about well, what I heard was like, if the municipalities continue to have these like stodgy old proposals and all these other things, but I feel like, as an economist, it's like the I'm sorry, the companies that want to do business with them, again with that alignment, that are going to adapt because they want to work with these, and it's just a matter of finding that equilibrium, so to speak. And I think right now is you're really having these literal mom and pop shops leverage this creativity and be able to compete with the IBMs. And I think about in the era of Doge and AI, it really is important right now to understand the strengths of small business, right? And so small business can really punch above their level and compete with these behemoths because they're smaller, they're nimble, they're agile, and they're much more price competitive. So all of these things I think are happening right now and will only continue to happen and grow in the future.
We got a really good question in the chat, so I just wanted to throw it out there and also say that I know we're a little bit off on time, but I'm going to open it up to questions now and I'll start feeding them in. Becca wants to know, has anyone found success in going full speed ahead with the incorporation of new information delivery techniques, or does it make sense to start small and go slow?
My view is it depends on the client. Is how well you know them, and some can adapt very quickly to new things, and some need to be taken more slow. So I think that's just a kind of a tailored approach.
I'm going to chime in because Brianna, you mentioned VR. I've actually done that for an interview. We put the QR codes in our proposal, and then for the interview, like brought in the goggles for them. So it was for a furniture company.
Mhm.
They taken the drawings from the architect. They mocked up the inside of like a classroom and an office building, branded it to the client. And in the proposal, if you scan the QR code, you could like walk through it with your phone. And then in the interview, we gave them the glasses and they could like walk around the room. The phones went over really well for this client. The VR goggles made a lot of them dizzy, which we didn't think about. So it was like learning on the spot. Some people just can't handle that because it's new. And now that VR gaming is more popular, this was many years ago when it was still kind of like I think Oculus had just gone mainstream, like you could just get them off the shelf. But now that we know VR gaming makes a lot of people nauseous, maybe would not have recommended that. So my advice is the same as John's: know your client. Client was open to it, but don't be alarmed or surprised if you get feedback on the spot that maybe it wasn't quite the right approach. Did win part of that contract, but yeah.
And I think it's like, to John's point too, I mean, it is knowing your client and knowing, kind of knowing what you can get away with. And I put that in quotes, but it's the, how far do you want to go with your creativity? How can you stand out? Because that's what it is. It's like, okay, did you answer all the questions? Did you check all the boxes for their criteria? But then it's like, okay, who stands out above the rest? And is it based off design? Is it based off your people and their qualifications? So sometimes it is a little bit with, risking it, but you can always start small because more than likely your technical team may want to go a little bit slower. So you kind of introduce a little bit here and there. And then sometimes you just try it and see what they think.
Yeah, I like that layered approach. Start small, think big, but if it's you don't want to make your clients nauseous, obviously. Maybe when you're anyway, but no, I think it's kind of an experiment. Try if it did work. If it didn't, quickly pull back and say, I'm making people uncomfortable. I gotta quickly adapt.
And that's what I love about this industry and about just, proposals and marketing. It's all science and it's all human behavior. So you're watching as things progress. You're seeing what sticks, what doesn't. So give it a try. If it doesn't work, you learned another thing that doesn't work and you go back to the drawing board.
Well, I'd argue that it's more of an art than a science.
Agreed.
But again, that's in the eye of the beholder. And again, just or marketing 101, it's what is going to resonate with that person. And you might have two people that see things oppositely, and they're on the same evaluation team. So you're like, how do I, can I have this person send a video, and this person look at a website, and this person gets a film, and then this person just gets a 80-page white paper with no graphics. I mean, and so that's the thing. Again, maybe that's that gamification. Again, we can like figure out who's on that selection board. Like we had one place where I was at, we had like 5 different personas, but we knew the people, and we were like, okay, these 5 people are going to be out of these 11 people, and what do we know about these people? Have we taken them to dinner or beers or whatever, right? And then what do we? Oh, they have kids. They don't have kids. Are they into these hobbies or those hobbies? I mean, the possibilities are infinite to try to gamify, but at the end of the day, it's how is my proposal going to be stacked against my peers, I always kind of view things from a cost lens because that's my job. But is this additional cost going to be a lot more valuable than the appreciation in cost? Is it going to be a 30x, subjective review higher than my 1% price increase? Then I'll do that. Is my 2% price increase not going to have an effect? Well, I don't want to have that. So great discussion today. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Yeah, thank you. The chat has been amazing. Thank you all again for hopping on over here. We have one more question, and then I'm going to say we ran a little bit over because of the weird timing, but we'll follow up any further questions. Anyone putting LinkedIn links on their resumes?
I have never done that or thought of that, and it sounds incredible. Like, that sounds like the smartest thing ever because it adds that kind of human layer. It kind of reminds me of when because I work on the higher ed side, when we say, someone's a Texas A&M grad. It's like just that additional nugget that kind of helps. So I love that idea. Thank you, Cynthia.
But my caveat about, so yes, like we have clients who do that, and the struggle is always, which is also in the chat, I'm reading, the profiles have to be stellar.
Yeah. And
because, yeah, so that's the struggle with LinkedIn, and not only not being able to control, like hopefully if you're submitting proposal now, they're not going to totally go off the rails in the next 5 days, but it's just the making sure that if you're sending somebody, but we also have clients who don't have bios on their website, and then at LinkedIn at least an opportunity to link out. But that's, if you're linking out also, and if you have good bios on your website where you can control it much more, then think about what will create a better first impression. But Brianna, to your point, like those connections, we went to the same high school, or, go whatever Ravens, or, all of those little human personal touches are so important, and LinkedIn is great for that. And a pitch for all of you getting your technical experts profiles optimized.
Yes.
Different topic.
That could be a whole session on its own, for sure. For sure. Any final thoughts? Thank you all so much for this panel. It has been absolutely wonderful. I already have ideas. I'm very excited, but
I would just piggyback again on what is that personal touch that will resonate, that you also are authentic about. Like, I don't care for the Ravens so much. I'm a Commanders guy, but I also like the Ravens as well. But again, we're both into sports. So just, again, finding that commonality, because at the end of the day, those decisions are made by people until they're made by bots. But, we're going to assume they're made by humans, and humans have their own tendencies and biases and personalities. And again, I kind of view things from the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, right? You're going to, you want to attract the same, like attracts like. And I like to say real recognizes real. And if you have the client that has a real problem and you're able to solve it, then it should be a pretty easy discussion. And, you just can't screw up the bid, but also you're limited to the creativity you're able to do based upon that specific client and their requirements.
But we can try to nudge. Let's try.
Push or pull them to you, or push them, push them to where you want them to go. I mean,
exactly.
That's all we do, right? We're just manipulating in the background. Awesome. Influence. That's a much better word than manipulating. You're influencing in the background. Well, thank you again. As I said to everyone, this is still being recorded. Famous last words, we hope. I'm pretty sure it's still being recorded. Thank you all so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Pi Day. And Ida, Brianna, John, thank you so much for this. This was absolutely wonderful. And we hope to have you back in the future, maybe for a part 2. But thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day.